and we have been discussing about the very Christian philosophical anthropology, and we enter into the first session, that is the first chapter, we would say, that is life and evolution. And we said there are two approaches to this question of life: the primary reflection and secondary reflection, given by Gabriel Marcel. And then we started discussing about the adequate definition of life. We discussed the first one, that is the scientist view. A scientist would probably define life like this manner. So we said that a scientist would define the life that all living beings have a cellular constitution, metabolism, have a fairly predictable course of growth and development, reproduction system in place, then ultimately the very living being meets with death. So these are the ways through which a scientist looks at life. I repeat, a scientist would look at a living being having cellular constitution, that is the first point. Second, living being with a metabolism. Life means metabolism. Third, there is predictable course of growth and development. That is the third. The fourth, the reproduction system in place for all the living beings. Then fifth, chemically unstable beings or living beings are chemically unstable. The next point, a scientist would say living beings are responsive to their environment. Responsive to their environment means they respond to every environment. I'm very sure at this very moment, COVID situation, all of us are responding to it. Different manner. Some respond to it in negative manner, some respond to it positive manner, healthy manner. So therefore, living beings are responsive to their environment. And finally, all living beings meet with death. All living beings meet with it. So this is what we have been discussing in the last class. Now, we are going to enter into the next point in the same definition of life after scientist view. How does a philosopher look at life? That's what we are going to start today. So a philosophical view or a philosopher's view of life. So let us start with this very definition of philosophy of life. There is a great division between living beings and non-living beings. What are the main difference or division between living being and non-living being? Of course, we can say it is nothing but life. But living beings are having a special difference, that is nothing but they are self-perfective with immanent activity. They have got the self-reflection, the possibility and capacity to think, rationalize, the possibility to have immanent activity. So that is the main point of view from the part of philosophy. So when you look at the physical condition, digestion, respiration, blood circulation, all that, finally we come to that very point that the very life can be defined from the philosophical view as the capacity for self-perfective immanent activity. So that is the very core sentence. I read it, you may write down. Life can therefore be defined. Life can be therefore defined as the capacity for self-perfective immanent activity. Self-perfective immanent activity. Now the next heading, the gradation of life. Can life be graded? Graded means, different types or different levels. Can the life be graded? That is the question that we are going to ask. And then the philosophers would answer, or they would be very keenly attentive to the fact consciousness seems to be the common thread that runs through the entire domain of living beings. Consciousness is the thread that runs through the entire domain of living beings, but in different levels. But different levels. So they don't use the word rationality. They don't use any other word, but they use the word consciousness. So all the beings, all living beings having consciousness means not in the same level, but different levels. Let us look at the different gradation or the different levels of consciousness. First, plants, Plants, plants have a sort of primitive consciousness, they say. The plants have got a primitive consciousness. Why? They reach out for sunlight and moisture. I'm very sure if you're told you are in the house, your own hometown, or in the minor seminary, or in any parish or in an institution, during this COVID-19 pandemic, you might have a lot of time for cultivation, agriculture, farming, or personal hobbies, and so on. And you might have, at least a few of you might have planted something in the compound and so on. And if you have done that a few months back, 6 months back, it must be yielding now. We happen to have a kind of cultivation here in the bishop's house, and some of the plants did not come out well, and obviously the reason was the sunlight was not enough. The sunlight was not enough. Some plants, as they grew, slowly they were bending out so that they may get the sunlight. The plant is primitive conscious to reach out for sunlight because it is their food. That is their food. So that's why plants have got that very primitive consciousness. The second, animals. Animals possess consciousness of others. Animals have got consciousness of others. They are capable of seeing, touching, tasting, hearing, and feeling. I need not dictate all this. You just look at any animal, they have got all these capacities. The capacity of seeing, touching, tasting, hearing, feeling. But animals do not possess one thing, according to a philosophical view. What is that? Self-consciousness. That is the difference. So therefore, they have got the consciousness of others, but they lack the consciousness of the self. So that is the major difference between the animals and man, the human being. So therefore, the next gradation would be man or human being. Besides being conscious of others, man is conscious of himself. So that is the point under this heading. Man possesses consciousness of others, at the same time consciousness of himself. He has the capacity for reflection. He has the capacity for reflection. I'm very sure after dictating all this, after teaching all this, if you are not able to reflect upon these points, naturally you will come to the second level of gradation. I'm sure that you are not going to come to that second level of gradation. You are on the third level of gradation, that is human being, whereby you have the capacity of reflection. But you need to ask whether I am using it or it is dusted inside. In this COVID-19, whether you are using that very brain. Anyway, I'm very sure you are using that, overusing maybe. So I'm not at all having any doubt about that. But remember, man in general is conscious of himself as well as the capacity for reflection. But even then, human consciousness has got limitations. Sometimes we may misunderstand, oh, we are better than the animals. We are far better than the animals because animals have consciousness of only others, but not of themselves. But we are superior. We have the consciousness of others as well as we have the consciousness of ourselves. So therefore, in that manner, we are superior. So we are better. Never. We are not the superior. We have some limitations. We have. What is that very limitation? We will come to know slowly. Man cannot possibly be conscious of himself without being consciousness of others. That is the limit. I repeat, man cannot possibly be conscious of himself without being conscious of others. So therefore, he is a dependent being. He has to depend upon others. So man's awareness of all that is not himself seems to be the precondition for becoming aware of himself. So everything else becomes a precondition so that he may become aware of himself. So that is the first limitation. The second limitation, man's knowledge of himself is incomplete. Man's knowledge of himself is incomplete. You know, there are large areas that are buried in his subconscious or shouldered in the mystery. I'm very sure, dear brothers, in our life, we have got so many things that we do not know. Others may know about it. You just ask your parents about your childhood days. They will tell a lot of stories. Sometimes you will be ashamed to hear such stories because you are not at all aware about what happened during your childhood. So obviously you feel ashamed when you come to know that such things happen. So therefore, we have understanding that we have got certain areas whereby we are not able to understand and know, whereas others know about it. There are certain areas which the others and myself are not at all aware. So that means man is a mystery. Our consciousness is limited. Our knowledge is incomplete. So therefore, I said that man's consciousness is not perfectly superior for the two reasons. The first reason I said that he is aware of himself just because he is aware of or conscious of others. So therefore, he is a dependent being. Second, his knowledge is incomplete. There are so many areas that are buried in his subconsciousness or shrouded in mystery. You know, you might have heard about Cardinal Francis van Thuan. If at all you have not heard, it's better that you search on Google and learn about him. He is a testimony of Vietnam people. 13 years he was in imprisonment. And there he had no opportunity to celebrate Mass. He acted sick, and they gave him drops of wine, and he used the bread and dust, three or one or two drops in the hand, and he used to celebrate Mass every day. 13 years. He is the bishop, then he became archbishop, and he became cardinal. He has written a lot of books, and one of the books that is very famous is Testimony of Hope. You know, it is because when Pope Francis met him, he was Pope Francis or previous Pope, I'm not sure. Pope asked him to preach the retreat for the Curia in Vatican. The cardinal said, the very bishop said, "Oh my God, I cannot. I'm not at all a preacher. I'm not at all good in speaking." So then Pope said, "You need not preach. You need not worry about giving a sermon, but you just give the testimony of hope. 13 years, he lived with the hope. Tomorrow, I will be able to celebrate Mass outside with the people." That is life of hope, 13 years behind. One day he was in the church preaching. As he was preaching, so many people, and at the end of the preaching, everybody said, "Fantastic experience. We experienced the Lord." Everybody said this was really soul enriching, and all appreciated him. You know, when all appreciated, he was very happy, and he had a prayer with God, and Lord appeared before him, and he had a conversation with the Lord. And the Lord asked a question, simple question: "What made you to be successful in your retreat preaching?" And he remembered the retreat preaching 1 week in the parish. Everybody was seated in the church. And then later he started preaching. But he was disturbed. The people were disturbed. Why, There was a man, particular man, like a beggar with shabby clothes, seated in front of the church. Just seated like this, leaning his head down there. And everybody was disturbed. When you are a priest, when you start preaching, right in front of you, if somebody is sleeping like, you feel so bad. You feel so disturbed. Your points, your communication will not be very effective. And the same way, Francis Vantuan, he was disturbed throughout the retreat. He remembered that. And then the Lord asked him, "But you made a powerful retreat. What made you?" Then immediately he said, "The people might have prayed for me, or I might have prayed well, or because of the grace of the Lord, or so many answers." But the Lord at the end said this answer. Do you know when your retreat became very powerful, very successful, just because of one thing? That is, there was a man whom you were disturbed, the people were disturbed. That man was leaning down, he was praying throughout these days only for you, only for the retreat preacher, so that the retreat preacher should be powerfully communicating the message of the gospel. And he was really touched by that very revelation. Lord revealed that whatever we think that we know may not be the truth. He was thinking that this is a beggar, this shabby clothes and so, but actually he was the powerful tool or instrument in the hands of the Lord. Man is a mystery. We can't make out what is going on. What we see with our eyes may not be true. What we don't see may be true. Therefore, when you study about human being, always remember man is a mystery, man is limited with his knowledge, and of course, with his consciousness. And the level of life goes up to the next stage, that is God. The next level of life is God. So we started with the plants, we entered into animals, third, we entered into man, and then now we are entering into God. What is the characteristic of God? God alone knows himself perfectly. So this is the maximum knowledge. This is the perfect revelation that not like human beings who is not aware completely of himself, but God is perfectly knowing him fullness. That is knowing himself to the full. God knows his creatures as well, completely. So not only that God knows within or himself very perfectly, but also others, that is the creatures. Why? Because he is the total cause of the entire world. So therefore, it is divine consciousness. Why it is divine consciousness? Perfect knowledge is possessed. So always remember that God possesses the consciousness. It would be more correct to say that God is conscious. So it is not that God possesses consciousness, but it is God is conscious. So therefore, dear brothers, we get into the concluding part of this very heading, definition of life from different aspects, the gradation of life in different levels, that is plants, animals, human beings, and then God. And now we enter into the next point, the three theories that attempt to explain life. So there we are going to analyze three theories that will explain about life. So therefore, let us have now the view or the study about the three theories that explain life. So, dear brothers, which are those theories? Those theories are: one, mechanism theory. Mechanism theory. Two, extreme vitalism theory. Extreme vitalism theory. And third, critical vitalism. Critical vitalism. Vitalism spelling Vitalism. What is mechanism theory? Mechanism theory speaks about or explains about life. What is that? It claims that life is simply the result of the combination of various material energies. I repeat, mechanism claims that life is simply the result of the combination of various material energies that can ultimately be explained away by physical and chemical laws. Basically, therefore, a living being is nothing but super complicated machine, and life is epiphenomenon. That's very interesting. You just look at yourself like a machine. You know, you require the fuel for the machine to run the machine. No, for the vehicles you require diesel or petrol. What about human beings? Yes, we too require. You have every day the food as the energy. So therefore, it is just like a machine. You function just like a machine. Each part, each body part is like part of a machine. And if something goes wrong with one part, you need to repair it. Sometimes you have to go for servicing. So all that is very, very, very applicable to all the living beings, machine and living. But some of you almost getting troubled. You know? How can a human being or living being be compared to machine or mechanism? Some of these views cannot be digested, tolerated. But even this is one of the theories. The second theory, that is vitalism, extreme vitalism theory. What is extreme vitalism? Of course, we need to understand what is vitalism. If you understand what is vitalism, then it is very easy. Vitalism means that every living organism are innumerable. There are innumerable mechanical forces at work. And therefore, science cannot give us any explanation how these mechanical factors cooperate harmoniously. Therefore, the perfection of an organism is done with a vital principle. You know, you join different parts together and you form a mechanism, and it becomes a machine. But there must be something which gives life to it. there must be something which gives vital part to it. So therefore, vitalism says there is a vital principle in every living being that is functioning or coordinating the functions of the different parts. So that is nothing but, according to vitalism theory, what is that very word? The vital principle could be. Can anyone imagine what could be in our human being? There is a vital principle. We call it divine. So therefore, that very vital principle could be named as SOUL, soul. This is what the vital principle of every mechanism. So therefore, vitalism theory says that in every living being, there must be soul. Now, what is the nature of the soul? What is the characteristic of soul? All that. So we are getting into the extreme vitalism theory. What is extreme vitalism theory? Extreme vitalism theory claims that the soul is a spiritual substance. So we already saw what is vitalism. Vitalism is speaking about a higher factor, a vital principle behind every living being. And vitalism would name that vital principle as soul. And now, extreme vitalism, what is the theory? The extreme vitalism theory proves or claims that the very soul is nothing but a spiritual substance. Not just a spiritual substance that keeps quiet within your being, but a spiritual substance that controls and directs the material body. So always remember, the soul is a spiritual substance. It controls the whole body. It gives a direction to the material body. Now, for example, a living organism is nothing but an animated corpse. It is what the definition is. So therefore, the soul is the thing that gives life to the body. So every living being is a fusion of two substances. Every living being is the fusion of two substances. Which are they? One is the corpse, the body, and the second is the vital principle, that is soul. So one spiritual and the other material. One the soul and the other is body. So that is what the extreme vitalism theory means. Now we get into the next theory, that is critical vitalism theory. What is critical vitalism theory? Dear brothers, critical vitalism theory instead speaks about or explains the concept of soul by recourse to a hylomorphic model. What is hylomorphic model? The living being in its entirety forms a single substance. Earlier, extreme vitalism, what did we say? The human being, the living beings are fusion of two substances. One is the soul and the second one is the body. Whereas when you look at the very critical vitalism, the whole living being as one. There is only one substance, or everything is clubbed into a single substance. So, what is the vital principle or form or soul? It is named in this theory substantial form. So, substantial form is the very name that they call for the vital principle. They don't call it as the fusion of two, but they are called as the vital principle, as the soul or substantial form. So therefore, dear friends, I just conclude that we are having very understanding of these three theories. And the first theory, as we dealt just now, the very mechanism theory. The second, we have got the vitalism theory, that is extreme vitalism. And finally, we have got the critical vitalism. What is the critical vitalism and extreme vitalism? We already saw about it. So therefore, I conclude these are the three theories. So when you look at the life, we understand these are the different or important points to be studied. So in this chapter, life is dealt. Next class, we get into in the same chapter, the second part of the first chapter, that is evolution. We will study about evolution, where we came from, who are our ancestors, and so on. No? So therefore, that's what I remember. One small child was curious. He wanted to know by hook and crook where we come from. And he asked the very father, went to father and said, where are we come from? No answer. Went to mother. Mother said, what kind of question you are asking? Unnecessary question at this very age. And she avoided that question. But finally, when he was pursuing, then mother gave this answer. Oh, your ancestors, we all come from God, from heaven. Okay. The child believed and then went to father once again. Mother said that we all have ancestors from heaven. We came from God. Then the father was not happy because he was not a believer. And he said, no, we are not coming from God. We are not coming from heaven, but we are coming from monkeys. Oh, the child was confused. Mother says from heaven, father says from monkeys. Now, which one is true? Because father was an expert in the field of evolution theories and so on, and Darwinism and so on. And now the child went again to mother and said, your father is telling that we are coming from not God, but monkeys. Then mother said, yeah. His family is coming from monkeys. My family is coming from God. So that's how they answered and saved the child from this very confusion. So next class, you start reflecting where you come from and so on. The evolution theories will help you to understand the origin of our